It may be part of human weakness to have evil wishes, but it is nothing short of monstrous that God should look on while every criminal was allowed to achieve his purpose against the innocent. This is so it was hardly without reason that one of your household asked where evil comes from if there is a God, and where good comes from if there isn't. And now you see the outcome of my innocence. Instead of reward for true goodness, punishment for a crime I did not commit. Stripped of every possession, thrust from my offices, and with my reputation in ruins, for doing a favour I have received a punishment. I seem to see the wicked haunts of criminals overflowing with happiness and joy. I seem to see all the most desperate of men threatening new false denunciations. And I seem to see the innocent deprived of peace and safety, and even of all chance of self-defence. In 523, BOETHIUS was condemned to death, thrown into prison under the false accusations of a paranoid king. He drowned in despair. Throughout his entire life he had kept to the ancient maxim, follow God. By all accounts he was a good man, and for this he was rewarded with a cold jail cell. Collapsed in grief and blinded by tears, his mind was shrouded in pain. That is when he was visited by Lady Philosophy. Radiant in impossible colour, with piercing eyes ablaze, she cleared his vision and nursed him back to lucidity. The clouds of my grief dissolved, and I drank in the light. The cause of his misery was the forgetting of his true nature. BOETHIUS now saw that his attention had been wrapped by the temptations and desolations of fortune. His mind had been ensnared by her bewitching traps. Lady Philosophy describes fortune as a monster who seduces with friendship the very people she is striving to cheat. Fortune has gifted us all we know, all we have. The nature of the changing faces of the random goddess is to snatch these gifts away without forewarning. If we choose her as the mistress to rule our life, we must commit our boat to the winds, and we must sail whichever way they blow, not just where we want. But if instead we take wisdom to be our guide, we can see fortune for who she is. Her very mutability deprives her threats of their terror, and her enticements of their allure. Indeed, fortune herself will tell us, inconstancy is my very essence. It is the game I never cease to play as I turn my wheel in its ever-changing circle, filled with joy as I bring the top to the bottom and the bottom to the top. Yes, rise up on my wheel if you like, but don't count it an injury when by the same token you begin to fall, as the rules of the game will require. BOETHIUS claims that all people are driven by the will to happiness. When we are granted the great things of the world such as wealth, reputation and pleasure, this will is fulfilled. But being bestowed by fortune, they will inevitably be taken away. As soon as we have laid claim to these things, we have set our minds upon a foundation of sand, doomed to be swept away by the storms and tides of fate. You know there is no constancy in human affairs when a single swift hour can often bring a man to nothing. In the accumulation of wealth, we are exposed to greater and greater risk. Keeping plenty of gold and jade in the palace makes no one able to defend it. If you had set out on the path of this life with empty pockets, you would whistle your way past any highwayman. And depending upon reputation, we become slaves of those whose opinions we need to uphold. Ultimately, status is reduced to dust. So however protracted the life of your fame, when compared with unending eternity, it is shown to be not just little, but nothing at all. And on bodily pleasure, its pursuit is full of anxiety and its fulfillment full of remorse. The end of pleasure is sorrow, is known to everyone who cares to recall his own excesses. But behind these worldly things lie genuine spiritual goods. In wealth, what we really seek is self-sufficiency. In reputation, respect, and in pleasure, joy. According to philosophy, the problem is that these spiritual goods are in fact a unity. They form an indivisible whole. If we fragment them into specifics, we descend from the divine into the worldly. In spite of a clouded memory, the mind seeks its own good, though like a drunkard it cannot find the path home. All the virtues, all forms of goodness, are identical and inseparable. The joy we search for is in this unity, which is goodness itself. This is pure happiness itself. It is what we call God. We are those who live in time, but God is He who resides in eternity. This apparent disconnect is the source of all our turmoil. And so, in our alienation, we look in time for happiness, that chaotic domain ruled by fortune. But ultimately, the source of all fortune is, somehow, the truly good God. Lady Philosophy describes this paradoxical situation as like rings of concentric circles, the tumult of fortune at the edge, and the stability of the divine at its heart. The circle furthest out rotates through a wider orbit, and the greater its distance from the indivisible centre point, the greater the space it spreads through. Anything that joins itself to the middle circle is brought close to simplicity, and no longer spreads out widely. In the same way, whatever moves any distance from the primary intelligence becomes enmeshed in ever stronger chains of fate, and everything is the freer from fate the closer it seeks the centre of things. And if it cleaves to the steadfast mind of God, it is free from movement, and so escapes the necessity imposed by fate. Time meets eternity in the present. Indeed, it is the secret of fortune that at the centre of her wheel is a hidden compassion. The absurd continually reveals to us that happiness isn't to be found in the temporal world, but in the kingdom of the eternal, to be present to the presence of God. At last it is revealed that our true nature is this happiness itself. For we are those whose mind is made in the image of God. We are to turn inwards, enter into thy closet, and when thou hast shut thy door, pray to thy Father which is in secret, and thy Father which seeth in secret shall reward thee openly. So wherever you are, if you don't try to escape from it, you can join him on the cross. This very moment may just be revealed to be of the nature of love itself. For I have swift and speedy wings, with which to mount the lofty skies, and when the mind has put them on, the earth below it will despise. It mounts the air sublunary, and far behind the clouds it leaves. It passes through the sphere of fire which from the ether heat receives, until it rises to the stars, with Phoebus there to join its ways, will sail with cold and ancient Saturn as soldier of his shining rays. Wherever night is spangled bright, the orbit of a star it takes, and when the orbit's path is done, the outmost pole of heaven forsakes. It treads beneath the speeding ether, possessing now the holy light, for here the King of Kings holds sway, the reins of all things holding tight. Unmoving moves the chariot fast, the Lord of all things shining bright. If there the pathway brings you back, the path you lost and seek anew, then I remember, you will say, my home, my source, my ending too. And if you choose to seek again the lightless earth which you have left, dictators whom the people fear will outcasts seem of home bereft.